So when I started off more than 35 years ago, there was really no concept of infrastructure. And all I knew is that project financing is something that I found interesting in the 2 year sort of probation period. So it was not so much by design. I did the Dabhol phase one financing, which was really the first international style limited recourse financing in India. And I realized what I didn't know, and there were so many different ways to look at it. And then I went on to structured finance and advisory. I kind of stayed with the infrastructure sector, but there were also petrochemical refineries and other sectors such as pharmaceuticals. And it was more where there was build and finance and, large fertilizer complexes and the like. So it was not like today where you have a choice and you can think about, should I get into infrastructure or not? So that's really been my journey. And I think the key aspect that I have enjoyed and I have savored more than anything else is really the diversity that I've experienced by actually somehow staying in infra-like and allied kind of sectors. And I had the opportunity to work for nearly 9 years in Singapore. And although we were based in Singapore, all my work, at least in the first 7 years or so, was entirely outside Singapore: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, even a bit of Cambodia. I had the opportunity to really look at diverse economies, worked with multinational companies, European firm, with an American boss for a large part. It's been an interesting journey. The infrastructure space is very different. It is actually a sector which is fairly well understood and defined. It is a space that is actually attracting large amounts of capital. I mean, we've seen nearly $5 billion of capex in the last 4 to 5 years in the infrastructure space. Renewable energy, we are the fifth largest capacities globally. And we have huge targets. We're just at 90 gigawatts or thereabouts. And we want to go up to a multiple of that. Roads, from year to year, we're seeing a doubling of the build that is being done. If last year in FY20, the average was about 300 odd kilometers per month, in September last year, I think it was just short of 650 odd kilometers per month. So, the government has huge targets, huge expenditure in sectors like even railways, optical fiber network, digital outreach right up to, every village in the country, airports, ports, logistics. It's huge. So the capacity for growth, the potential for growth is tremendous. And therefore, you're also going to see and are seeing a large amount of capital come into the sector. I will say one big change I have seen in the last several decades is that there are more women who are in the financing points of infrastructure, but not so many in the actual core infrastructure execution, the companies at the front end. And I think the key to it is to ensuring that they stay on once they do enter. And also to see more participation in the actual infrastructure space outside the financial services and legal areas. Actually, it's been very interesting. So as I told you, I traveled to a lot of countries for work from Singapore, using Singapore as a base. And while I was doing this, I worked in organizations which were either full of Europeans and Americans, the lawyers, etc., that we worked with. It was great to really observe the differences. I will say this: I mean, when I saw companies across Asia, I actually felt they're not that different from our homegrown companies. They are largely family run. Yes, they were much larger companies, but the approach, the way they were managed, were there were so many similarities. So the companies were, if the domestic, say a Taiwanese company, and if I'm and an Indonesian company, they were very similar. The Korean chaebols were more professional. I mean, different in a way. So were the Japanese, but if you look at the rest of Asia and the family-owned conglomerates, at the core, I felt they were very similar to our own domestic ones. But when I looked at the firms I worked with, one big differentiator was process. There was a huge adherence to processes, which I had not seen and experienced as much in the firms I had worked with in India. So, and to me, and that is a learning that I have carried with me. And I saw the benefits of that. If we marry the two and supposedly strike that balance, I think it's great. Well, I must say, I mean, there are, look at it from some different angles. The firm I'm with now actually focuses on gender diversity and believes in gender diversity and works to implement that. The firms I worked with in Singapore actually did not practice gender diversity as a principle. Especially one of the firms I was with and spent the most amount of time there was considered a completely male chauvinistic bastion, even by their own people in their own country, and a very macho kind of atmosphere. Senior levels, you did feel very, very, it's not something I have let get to me ever, but you were in a very rare camp if you were a woman. Having said that, the same organization today is headed by a woman of Asian origin, and that is very gratifying. So I think organizations have come a long way from them. Having said that, there were some practices that I saw in these organizations which we in India we still don't have in most organizations. I'm familiar with, and these were not necessarily aimed at women. They were policies that were there, like you could do part-time work for a period. It could even be something that could be used by men. It was something that benefited women. I knew women who took advantage of that when their children were small and did not lose out on their careers. Or you could take a sabbatical, which, yes, is being seen in many organizations here. And I think these are the kind of things that if that kind of flexibility comes into the workforce here, women will find it easier to balance out their personal life and their professional life. I've actually enjoyed the diversity. I revel in it. As I said, I have loved working through various aspects of the financial services world. Be it project finance. Would I have liked to continue being a project finance person forever? I think not. It's not something I want to do today. Would I have liked to be an investment banking person, which was at one time? No, it's not something I would have liked to continue. And now I feel I'm doing what I really enjoy. And, this to me, diversity is not just gender diversity. It's also working with different nationalities, working with people of different religions, working perhaps with, people of different orientations, and of course, gender also. Diversity has been a constant source of curiosity and engagement and enjoyment for me. I think we have to embrace diversity in all its forms. And we have to be open to it, because then you can only learn. And so long as you keep learning, as long as I keep learning, as long as there are new things that kindle my curiosity, I stay motivated. I'm ready to get up, go, and to understand, to explore, and to learn. So that's been extremely important. I think it's very important important for people to love what they do, to enjoy what you are doing. That is an extremely important part of working. I think it's in fact very important and exciting to be open to new possibilities and new areas, and you'll be surprised at what awaits you. I don't really have role models as such, not one or two that I've looked up to as the shining beacon for my career or life. Having said that, there are lots of people who've inspired me, and it's not just women; it's men and women who have inspired me, who are very courageous, who have done very interesting work, who have been humane and been as not just intelligent and curious and smart, but also people who have trodden a different path and have stood up for others, who've been considerate. So right from my early days, from my first job, I had a boss, a lady who was the most live fire, energetic person I have seen. And she never balked at speaking her mind. She was she was very sharp, very intelligent, not always the most diplomatic, in fact, rarely diplomatic, and a hugely interesting person and an inspiring person for me. This was Mrs. Rangarajan, and another lady who later in the same place was very inspirational was uh, later to become the SBI chairman, Arundhati. Just getting to know them, the way they approach life and the way they also approach work has been immensely inspiring and interesting for me. But let me be fair, because I will not say that I have drawn inspiration only from women. I have drawn as much inspiration from some very, very solid people of the other gender. I would say, let me put it into a few buckets. So, one, there are certain, and this is just based on my own experience. So, I think people, women should be confident, should be self assured, um, should be aware of their capabilities. That's extremely important because I have found generally men to be more confident of their abilities. In general, women need to believe in themselves. And if they believe in themselves, others will believe in them. Secondly, it's something that I have not had the benefit of, being in the organizations I've been. We haven't had any policies around it. To have a mentor or mentors, I think it's hugely useful. It's nice to have somebody more as a sounding board than to always give advice or guidance. But usually you can guide yourself. You just need somebody to use as a sounding board to sound out your views, to clarify your thoughts, and you'll find the path yourself. One other thing that I feel women do far less than men is network. But by and large, we tend to ignore this area. And there are many reasons for it. Many a time, women are multitasking and balancing 200 things. So, apart from just work, they don't have time to focus on their careers. So, they work, but they're not focusing on the career. And I think if you want a career, it's very important to engage with the environment around you at the workplace, and networking becomes an important component of that. I love reading. I think that's a source of immense joy. I read a lot of fiction, but I'm not a huge fan of management books. Uh, but I've loved reading about nonfiction situations, real life situations, which is great. I like being outdoors too. I love hiking in the hills in particular. I enjoy theater, I enjoy music. Haven't really done much of that in the last 1 year. Love eating out and hanging out with friends. So I love eating and drinking too. I like interacting with people. So I'm fairly gregarious and outgoing in that sense.